and welcome to the Shrewton Primary School podcast, What Do You Do? Hosted by myself, Emily Malord, head teacher, and the pupils of Shrewton Primary School. We are here to ask the questions that you want answered. Covering careers from writing to nursing and everything in between, we want you to be inspired by the people who love what they do every day. So, ask anything. Would you like to know their most successful moment, the favourite part of their job, or maybe the barriers they've had to overcome to get to where they are today? No question is off limits. We hope you enjoy what this series has to offer and look forward to hearing your feedback. But for now, sit back, listen and enjoy. Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to podcast number 5. This week we are lucky to be joined by Rebecca, who is a crime scene investigator based in Berkshire, and the co-hosted this week by two more of our wonderful year 5-6s. We have Bill in year 6. Bill, give us a wave. And we have Imi in year 5. You may not recognise Imi in this picture because she's not dancing. And welcome, Rebecca. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you all.
Thank you. Right, Bill, let's kick straight off. You have the first question. Let's go for it.
How did you become a crime scene investigator and why did you want to be one?
So it was a bit of a long process to get here. I mean, I kind of wanted to become one because I'm quite a nosy person, if I'm honest, and I quite like knowing what's going on and I quite like finding out answers. So I looked into it when I was doing work experience when I was still at secondary school, and because it was kind of mainly with the police, all the different departments, you couldn't really get work experience there. But I was given some advice by someone who worked there, and it was kind of, because it's quite a popular career choice with all the TV programmes and everything that are there and that are on at the moment, it was choose something where you can kind of go at it from an angle. So I decided to do pharmacology as a degree, so looking at drugs and how they're made up and how they affect the body and everything. And so I thought I could work in a lab. But after I did that, I managed to get onto a master's, and I did a master's degree, which then luckily I managed to get a job with the police and kind of got in that way. But yeah, I've always wanted to do it because I'm quite a nosy person and want to know what's going on.
Were there any particular subjects at school that you found really helped initially? So like Bill in particular, going to secondary school in September, what sort of subjects were you sort of drawn towards that gave you that end goal? Yeah,
so the ones that were kind of better and helped me most in my degree were probably the sciences, so biology and chemistry, mainly for the degrees that I did, and probably a little bit more chemistry. But I mean, in all honesty, this field now, all of those kind of things, they kind of go out to the scientists in the lab. We're mainly based out and about at the jobs. So that kind of thing gets done by different people now, but it really did help me with my degree, having that kind of background.
Fantastic, thank you. Imi, I think it's over to you, love.
Do you work in a lab or do you visit the actual crime scenes?
So I do visit the actual crime scenes, yeah. So I work for the police. I'm not actually a police officer. I'm what's called a civilian member of staff. But we cover the whole of Berkshire and even sometimes Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire. So we go out to where the crime has happened. Whether that's someone's house, whether that is sometimes just in a street, whether it's in a park or a hotel, we'll go out to where the crime has happened.
Cool. So a lot of travel.
A lot of travel, yes. There is that. Sometimes downside.
Imi, I think you've got the next one too.
Do you find / process evidence?
So there's lots of different ways to do it. What we mainly go in looking for is we look for things that maybe the offenders have left behind, so if they've dropped anything, or then we look for things like their fingerprints or their DNA, so we look to see if they've maybe cut themselves, so we look to see if there's any blood, and there's lots of different ways that we can recover it. Fingerprints, we have lots of special powders, because when you kind of sweat all the little patterns in your fingers and your fingerprints, they come out and they can leave marks on certain surfaces. So we have lots of different powders, that we can help to enhance those and lift them. Then we lift them with basically a giant bit of sellotape. That's how we lift fingerprints. Other things, we put them into those evidence bags, you see on television that are clear and you tape them closed. We do that. We have boxes. Sometimes we have to call specialists in if we can't actually recover it ourselves. But yeah, mainly that kind of thing. Like we have, if we have footprints as well, we have these big gel lifters. They're big squares and they kind of roll onto it and you can lift up a footprint. Or we have casting material, so you get kind of, when you break your arm or something like that, you have a big plaster cast on it. You can pour that and it sets, and so you get a kind of a 3D impression of a footprint as well. So there's lots of different ways we can lift stuff.
Cool. Bill, is this living up to your fictional ideas of what Becky's job is?
Completely.
Yeah.
Utterly.
We have
these headphones aren't working for the best, but it'll do.
That's fine. You're rocking it. It's fine. But yeah, because Bill and I were talking just before this about Bill reads a lot of sort of crime fiction novels, and he was saying, "Oh, I wonder if this is real and this is real." So it sounds almost like what you see on TV as well. Do you find that? Totally random question, but do you find that when you're watching TV adaptations of your job, is it quite accurate?
Some yes and no. Sometimes it's sometimes they get evidence from something which won't be necessarily as realistic in real life, because sometimes you see on the programs, like if they're looking at CCTV, it's always a very good picture, whereas actually in reality it's very grainy and pretty terrible. And sometimes they can lift fingerprints or get the smallest bits of evidence, which in real life it's not usually kind of all that common. I do remember someone did ask me once, I turned up at a scene and I got my torch out, just a simple torch, and the victim asked me if it was a fingerprint scanner. I was like, no, it's just a torch.
You wish.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Bill, I think the next question is with you.
It's, what's the weirdest piece of evidence you've found or processed?
The weirdest bit of evidence? If I'm honest, I can't really think of one. I think actually I once found, it's a bit strange, I think we couldn't figure out what it was. I was at a job with a colleague and there was a little bit of, I'm not sure what it was, in a Ziploc bag, but I think we decided it was a bit of fossilised poop.
Oh, nice.
I don't quite know why, but I think the owners of the house, I'm not sure what they did, but they had some very strange things in their house. I know a colleague as well, unfortunately a parrot got injured. It was a bit of a weird job.
Oh.
And I think we had to send a parrot to the lab. So we see lots
of live evidence.
Yes, little bit weird.
Yeah, that definitely goes with the weirdest piece of evidence. We'll take it. Imi,
what other people and professions do you work with?
Who else do I work with? So we work obviously quite closely alongside with the police officers, but we can also work alongside lots of other different specialists. So if, for example, we go to a fire scene, we get the fire brigade out and they have fire investigators that are very good at looking at where the fire started and what might have started it. We work with scientists from different labs. So if we have sometimes kind of drug cultivations, we can get expertise from people that deal with chemicals and things like that, or scientists that deal with blood. If it's quite a nasty scene and there's quite a lot of blood around, we sometimes need their help in kind of interpreting it, maybe where the blood started, how that blood was put on the wall, maybe it's kind of been flung off an object or something like that. So we can sometimes get scientists to the scene as well. So we work with quite a lot of different agencies, which is sometimes quite good because you can get to know a lot of different people.
Yeah, we talk a lot about sort of community here and how using the skills across what our local area. So I suppose it's when you're in your job, that's quite a common element, isn't it? That community element there, where people with different skills coming together for a sort of a united cause or a united reason.
Yeah, because I mean, we're not necessarily experts in any field. We're kind of the front bit, and then we will send everything out to the expert. So it might be that if we're at a scene and we're not too confident on something, or we need second advice, second kind of opinion, we will get those people in that kind of can actually properly determine what's happened. So it helps us and then helps the police officers when investigating it.
So how many people can sometimes end up working on one incident or one piece of evidence?
So, for example, if we just went to kind of a normal burglary, it could be that a few police officers go first of all, and then you have something called CID, that the investigation team, they'll then go. I'll then go, and then depending on what kind of evidence they get, it can then be spread out to lots of different departments. So we then have the experts in our fingerprint department, we can have the footwear department involved, we can have something called the fingerprint development lab. So if we get some items which you can't really put powder on at scene and they're best enhanced with chemicals, we send it to them. We can send things to external labs. It can either be a couple people, or it can be kind of maybe 50 or 60. There's no kind of, nothing with this job is ever simple or has an actual straight answer. It can really vary.
Wow, that's incredible to think there's like a whole team of people that just work in like the footprint department of like forensics, or like, you know, their speciality is fingerprints. That seems so, you know, bizarre to think that there's people that have real expertise and skills in the tiniest part, you know, of us. Like really cool. So Bill, it's back to you, I think.
Has a crime scene been solved purely on a piece of evidence you found?
Do you know what? I was actually talking to my mum about this the other day because I remembered it, and it was a few years ago, and it was just after Christmas, and it was quite horrible really, because it was just after Christmas, and the people had been away celebrating, and I met them there, and their house had been burgled, unfortunately, whilst they'd been away. And what this person had done is they'd thrown eggs around the house. And I think he was just being nasty, throwing eggs. But what that then meant was all the whites of the eggs got on his shoes. So he left some beautiful footprints. So when the police went to arrest him, they found his shoes and they could match them at the footprint department. They matched them up and put him in the house, and he was convicted from it. So that was quite a good job.
Wow. Talk about being the product of your own demise. Like
exactly.
You know, there's, you know, wow. That's a really cool story. Very sad that those people obviously suffered that burglary, but you know, I'm glad that you were able to help the outcome there. We've started talking about fingerprints already. Most of our questions today actually came from our year ones, who were very interested in what you do. And I think they have a picture of you in, like, you know, a long parka and a hat, sort of Sherlock Holmes style, with a big magnifying glass, you know, which is obviously very adorable. So Imi, do you want to ask the question about the fingerprints that they came up with?
Do you take fingerprints, and how do you look for them?
Yeah, they were really interested to know where do you look and how do you find them?
Okay, so what we basically do is, if I went into a scene, when I was looking for fingerprints, I'd look at the items that are most suitable to have a fingerprint. So something like clothes is not very good because it's a fabric material and you can't get fingerprints off of those usually. So the surfaces that we look at are kind of glass. Glass is very good for fingerprints, or the plastic windows, the UPVC windows, the frames of them are very good as well. And anything that's kind of smooth or shiny, so any kind of magazines or shiny cardboard, that kind of thing, we know is a suitable surface. So if someone touched it, they're likely to leave a fingerprint. And then, like I said before, we've got lots of different powders. So we've got silver ones, white ones, black ones, and it all depends what surface we're looking at. Sometimes if we look at a car, if it's a white car, we might use a silver or a black powder, because then we'll be able to see the fingerprints a bit easier. But yeah, so we'll just put small amounts of powder on, just to kind of bring that, you know, it will stick to all the bits of the sweat that comes out of your fingers. So then you can kind of, it's quite good to see if your mum and dad's allow it. Sometimes you can do this at home. So we obviously have our special powders, But even things like if you got a glass and put your hands around it, sometimes even things like hot chocolate powder or custard powder, if you get a bit of a paintbrush, you can brush it on, and sometimes you can kind of DIY at home looking for fingerprints.
Oh, that's a very cool idea. Right, guys, this week then, your challenge, let's see how many of us can take a sample of our own fingerprints. So pick up a glass, and then use, I'm sure we've got some hot chocolate or, like you say, custard powder, or you can have a go and see what you can come up with. That's a very cool idea. Bill,
what type of equipment do you use?
So we've got our cameras. So the first thing we do when we go into a scene is we'll take photographs of everything and show where everything is. Excuse me. And then we've got our van that's fully stocked with all of our equipment. But the main kind of things we use, we've got a bit of a briefcase, and in that we've got all of our powders, we've got our torches, everything that we seize the evidence in. We have a few chemicals that we take with us that can tell us if something is blood or not. So sometimes if there's a red dot on a piece of glass or at a scene and we want to know whether it's blood, we have a few chemicals that we can take a little sample of it, and then we put the chemicals on it, and if it goes purple, it tells us that it's blood or not. So we can sometimes do that. We have another bit of kit after that, which is quite good, that tells us if it's human blood. So I once did a job where there was a hole in a door and there was lots of little bits of blood around it, but we thought the dog had bitten through it. And so when I tested it, it obviously came up that, yeah, it was blood. But then when I used the second test, it told me that it wasn't human blood.
Wow.
So we use little things like that. What other equipment?
I'm totally imagining your briefcase is like Inspector Gadget style, by the way. Like, you know, like it falls open and everything like springs out and you've just got like loads of stuff in there. Yeah.
If only. We've now got kind of toolkits. So we look like we're going to work on a building site.
And what bigger pieces of equipment do you have in your labs that you aren't able to be ported around?
Okay, so in terms of the labs, we've got sometimes in the fingerprint development lab, they've got big machines that you can put. Sometimes there's one treatment called super glue treatment, so you'll put an item in a big drying cabinet or something similar, and it will heat up and basically melt the super glue, then it will stick to any fingerprints in it, so that's quite handy. There's lots of light sources as well. Different things fluoresce under different light sources, so that can sometimes be at the lab. There is, what else is there up at headquarters? We've got a screen lab as well that can dry pieces of clothing out, do all the testing for see if there's DNA on anything and stuff like that, and check to see if there's saliva on anything. Those are the kind of things that we don't usually take out to the scenes.
We've been talking obviously a lot in the media, and like the kids would have heard a lot about sort of personal protective equipment of late. Yeah. Do you guys, I presume that's something you use as a standard daily like sort of resource to prevent like any hair strands or whatever contaminating evidence?
Yeah, so it's very variable based on what crime scene we're going into, and obviously recently we've had to kind of change quite a bit of how we go in and how we dress, mainly to protect us, but to protect the people's houses that we're going into, because obviously we go to quite a few different houses. So usually if we were just going to a burglary scene, for example, we'd usually just wear gloves and a face mask. That's also so we don't breathe in the powder. But anything more serious, that's when we'd put on our white suits and our foot coverings, and we have double gloves, face masks, we have hair nets as well. They're sometimes better because it kind of otherwise you get so hot in summer, because you're basically wrapping yourself in cling film, so you get very, very warm. But yeah, at the moment as well, when we're going into people's houses, we're wearing boiler suits, which is just reducing that contamination really of us bringing anything in or taking anything out and back to the office. So we're very careful at the moment with what we're doing. And we've got big, they look a bit like gas masks, which we wear for if we go to a dead body, for example, just to make sure there's no that level of contamination, or we don't get poorly either.
Yeah. So I presume, obviously, you guys have been key workers throughout this. Have you seen, is your workload, say, the same? Is it increased? Is it decreased as a result of the lockdown period we've been in?
It's changed, I think, some of the crime types that we're going to. The number of houses that have been broken into, it has reduced quite a lot, mainly because I think everyone's at home. So the kind of the opportunists, if they're wandering down the street, which is usually what we see, unfortunately, in the job, there's not the empty houses that they can go and break into. So that kind of thing has reduced, which is quite good to see. But a lot of, unfortunately, more kind of violent crimes, I think, where people are maybe getting on top of one another in lockdown, or maybe the drugs side of things, that's kind of increased. So it's different crimes are kind of going up and down, I think.
Wow, okay. Imi, last question before our quick fire round.
Do you work in one location or a set area?
So I work in Berkshire, but because Thames Valley Police, the police force I work with, because it covers 3 counties, it's kind of, we'll come in and we'll look at Berkshire's job. But if, for example, there's been a big incident up in Oxfordshire and they need more staff, it can be that we'll move around the force. I've done jobs, for example, up in Milton Keynes, so it would take me 2 hours to get there. But it's mainly around Berkshire, but we can go anywhere. There's no kind of limit to our drive any day.
Wow. Okay, so each week we've been asking the same end questions to all of our guests to see how their answers differ, and just to gauge different interests, really. So I was going to call you Alfie. You're not Alfie. Bill, over to you.
What 3 objects would you take to a desert island?
Desert island. I think I'd take some sunglasses, so I'm not squinting all the time. I think I'd probably take a buddy. I think I'd take a friend, so I wasn't by myself. And I'd probably take some chocolate.
Nice. Yeah, emergency
rations.
Supply. I like it. So these 2 questions have been, I think, possibly some of the most interesting out of all of the podcasts. So what's so far been your greatest success?
Probably getting the job that I always wanted. So even when I was at school, I did want to be a crime scene investigator or in the forensic field. So yeah, getting that job, I think I was pretty happy when it came through.
Yeah, I bet. Well deserved as well. And on the flip side, we talk to the children a lot about how it's really powerful to learn from your failures, and how just because you failed, it needs to spur you on to something better, and not having that element of quitting. So what has been your greatest failure?
I think probably one thing that still kind of annoys me was I failed an exam at uni. It was just after Christmas, and if I'm honest, I didn't revise properly enough because we'd had a very long term and then it was Christmas, and so I did not want to do any work, and so I kind of crammed everything in right at the very end, and I didn't do very well in the exam. And so that, I think, is something that really annoys me to this day, and I should have done more revision. And I think, that's one thing that's I'm holding on to.
You're plagued by it. I think it's that element of letting yourself down, isn't it? It's not quite, I think when you're let down by somebody else, and that happens in our lives as well, it's easy to put that blame outwards and sort of move on, because you can put it on someone else. But when it's your own failure, that's really hard to move past, because you've only got yourself to blame, and that sits with you, doesn't it? But you've learned from it. I bet you did better out in your exams afterwards. There you go. See, learning from your failures. Imi, your turn.
The place you would most like to visit?
Place I'd most like to visit. I'd quite like to do Australia. I've done a little bit when I was on holiday, much younger, when I was with my family, but there's lots of areas I think I'd still quite like to visit, like the Great Barrier Reef, before if it gets destroyed or it's kind of dying a bit. I'd quite like to visit there to see it in its beauty.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I will totally happily come with you. Bill,
what job would you like to try for at least 24 hours?
What job would I try? Do you know what? My grandma was a speech and language therapist, and I think I'd probably quite like to have a go at that, because I quite like helping people. So I'd quite like to see what that was about, and try and help people after maybe they've had a stroke or something, helping them find out a way to talk again.
Yeah, we actually work with quite a lot of speech and language therapists. You know, with some of our children work with speech and language therapists, and it's very fascinating, sort of language acquisition and sounds and strategies, and you know, how quickly children progress when they have speech and language support. It's really interesting. Imi,
what's your favourite song?
Oh,
it's a toughie.
It is a toughie. I don't think I've got a favourite, if I'm honest.
Favourite genre?
I was about to say, I think I'm probably just a 90s pop girl. I do like a bit of Spice Girls and S Club 7 around now.
Yeah, there's a reason that Rebecca and I are friends. It's one of the many, but there's a solid one up there. And so last question that we've been asking everybody, what would be one thing you'd go back and tell your primary school self towards the end of your primary journey? What would that piece of advice be?
Do you know, I think I'd probably say, if you're given an opportunity to do something, and if you can do something, do it, because you'll end up just regretting it otherwise. So I think if you get an opportunity to go somewhere, or you get an opportunity to try something, just do it. See what happens. Just try and take it on. Take those experiences on, and then you might regret it, but you might regret not doing them. Yeah,
grab it by both both hands. I think that actually it really links nicely to our podcast from last week, and our guest was a drummer, and he said he believes there's an instrument for everybody, and you should just try as many instruments as you can until you find the one that sparks something in you. And I completely agree with you. I think if you're lucky enough to be given opportunities in primary and secondary, you know, trips, sports fixtures, sports teams, music, arts, drama, science, any of it, try as much as you can, because you will find one thing that really speaks to your soul, and then like really drives you forward and puts you on a path that you then could continue until university and later on in life. Because sometimes I think we probably both know a lot of people who have taken a really long time to know what they want to do, and what career they'd like. So I think maybe a way to prevent that sometimes, or make that easier, is to, like you say, just try.
You can see what you enjoy, see what you don't enjoy. It makes things a lot easier. When I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with life, I was very jealous of everyone that knew what they wanted to do, because I didn't think I'd necessarily get to do this job because it was so competitive. So actually trying to figure out what I wanted to study, it was very difficult. So I was jealous of people who knew exactly what they wanted.
I wonder if they're all still doing it now. That would be a different question. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy work schedule. I know you're working later on today. You've got a shift. So really appreciate you making time out of your free time to talk to us. I think Rebecca's been a pretty cool guest. What do you think, guys?
Definitely. 100%.
Yeah, you've been feeling inspired?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going to some fingerprints this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Becky. Really heartfelt thank you for taking time out. And guys, excellent co-hosting. Really articulate questions, so well done. And thank you to the children that sent their questions in, and the ones in the school that came up with the ones here, for having some great questions to ask our guests in the first place. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.